Morning, everyone. Haman plots to destroy the Jews. Sometime later, King Xerxes promoted a man named Haman to the position of prime minister. Haman was the son of Hammedatha, a descendant of Agag. The king ordered all the officials in his service to show their respect for Haman by kneeling and bowing to him. They all did so, except for Mordecai, who refused to do it. The other officials in the royal service asked him why he was disobeying the king's command. Day after day they urged him to give in, but he explained, and he would not listen to them. I am a Jew, he explained, and I cannot bow to Haman. So they told Haman about this, wondering if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct. Haman was furious when he realized that Mordecai was not going to kneel and bow to him. And when he learned that Mordecai was a Jew, he decided to do more than punish Mordecai alone. He made plans to kill every Jew in the whole Persian Empire. In the 12th year of King Xerxes' rule, in the first month, the month of Nisan, Haman ordered the lots to be cast to find out the right day and month to carry out his plot. The 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, was decided on. So Haman told the king, "There is a certain race of people scattered all over your empire and found in every province. They observe customs that are not like any of those of any other people. Moreover, they do not obey the laws of the empire, so it is not in your best interests to tolerate them. If it please your majesty, issue a decree that they are put to death. If you do, I guarantee that I will be able to put more than 340,000 kilograms of silver into the royal treasury for administration of the empire." The king took off his ring, which was used to stamp proclamations and make them official, and gave it to the enemy of the Jewish people, Haman, son of Hammedatha, the descendant of Agag. The king told him, "The people and their money are yours. Do as you like with them." So on the 13th day of the first month, Haman called the king's secretaries and dictated a proclamation to be translated into every language and system of writing used in the empire, and to be sent to all the rulers, governors, and officials. It was issued in the name of King Xerxes and stamped with his ring. Runners took this proclamation to every province of the empire. It contained the instructions that on a single day, the 13th day of Adar, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be killed. They were to be slaughtered without mercy, and their belongings were to be taken. The contents of the proclamation were to be made public in every province, so that everyone would be prepared when the day came. At the king's command, the decree was made public in the capital city of Susa, and runners carried the news to the provinces. The king and Haman sat down and had a drink while the city of Susa was being thrown into confusion.
It does not need to be so loud. Thank you. Okay, now we'll see whether this works. Yes. Okay, it's a great story, Esther, and it's quite a long reading. So I start with a recap, then we go into the names and the meaning behind it, which will help you to bring the story together. Yeah? So basically it starts with Mordecai. It's very loud here. Mordecai refuses to bow to Haman, and Haman gets very, very angry, of course. He cannot bow, probably to an Agagite. Maybe there's some pride involved also. We have seen a lot of proudness and pride with King, of course, and with Haman. Maybe Mordecai has a bit of it also, refuses to bow. It has a lot of consequence for the whole people. Like what happened to Vashti has a lot of consequence to all the women in the empire. Because this we've seen in the previous chapters that some people found like, okay, we need to make clear to all the women in the whole of our empire that they should be very submissive and are basically second grade. And here also there's a lot of effect for other people. This man's actions bears down on other people, which does not mean it's not the right thing to do. But actions have consequences, not only for yourself, but also for other people. Your people, your children, they have consequences. And sometimes it's good to accept these consequences. Yeah? It's like it's echoing a theme from a previous chapter, which happens a lot in stories. Okay, Haman is getting very angry. He wants to destroy not only Mordecai, but all of the people, which also makes it a very national story. It's like there will always be enemies after your life. See what happens to them. And then the lot is cast. Persians were very much into astrology and casting lots and telling fortunes, so they check. And this is happening in the first month, and it's like the lot cast, and it falls on the last month. Like every month has some unfavorable things, or every month has something in favor for the Jewish people, and so they end with the last month. There's a story that Haman says, good, this is the month of Pisces, fish, and we will devour them like one fish devours another fish. The trick is also there, all the other months are unsuitable. It's just the last month, the only month left where the lot falls. He offers an incredible lot of silver to the coffers of the king. And the king says, leave the money, here's my ring. It's like, he's not concerned for the national treasury, and he's not prudent in giving authority away. He has promoted Haman, and now he's giving away all of his authority by actually not stamping the law, but giving the right to stamp the law to Haman. He's letting go of all of his authority. And then everyone is shocked, but very tellingly, they sit down and have a drink. Every time the king is there, he's having a drink. He's drinking all the time. There's only one moment in the whole story, when it's close to the end of Haman, that he actually forgets to take his wine. He's very angry, goes into the garden, leaving his wine. Very significant, suddenly he's not taking his wine. So it has to do with a lot of drinking, which also has to do with Feast of Purim, because there was one thing that I missed here already in the reading. After the introduction of Haman is presented, there should have been a lot of rattling, a lot of noise, and in every synagogue, all the children could make as much noise as they wanted when they hear the name Haman. It's very interactive. And it has to do with the feast, and we'll get to that. So that's the outline with some hints. Okay, the first one, Haman, meaning magnificent, but also maybe noiseful, bragger. But also, children make a lot of noise. Yeah, and he's named also after one of the Elamite gods, the Babylonian gods. Esther means simply star. We'll get to it later. Mordecai. He's named worshipper of Marduk, one of the main gods of the Babylonian Elamite. In this country, he had lots of gods, and when one country was conquered by another country, they took the gods on. They had a whole pantheon. So you could say it's a Mesopotamian god and also a Persian god. Interesting that Mordecai, who's a Jew, has received a very Persian Mesopotamian name. Ahasuerus means also prince, head, chief. It's a very general name. It's not saying this is Xerxes, but there's a slightly different name. So if people would make a problem with, hey, you're insulting our king, no, that was the former king, the one you deposed, you know? It's not literally. Cyrus, who established the kingdom of the Persians, is named in the book of Jeremiah, when he says, Kores is the one who actually will send the people home. He is honored and he's named. And here it's slightly dubious. It's not very clear. He's just named the chief, the prince. It's not the Persian name, but and it's replaced by the name Xerxes in the translation, which probably the person that is modeled after. And Vashti, the queen who's deposed, is called Best. So if you go to Mordecai, if you look into his ancestry, you find he is the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish. And Shimei is actually one of the sons of Saul, a descendant of Saul, and the son of Kish, who is the father of Saul. So Saul is not mentioned, but it's generally assumed that he's from Benjamin and he's from the tribe that Saul came from, but he's also the descendant of Saul, which is quite important if you go to Haman in a moment. And also he has this name, worshipper of Marduk, Mesopotamian chief god. He has a very good position at court. He's very influential. He has access to the gate. And he speaks with courtiers. Welcome. He's very integrated in the culture, you could say. But it's clear from the story that's not what is going to protect you. Because the story is about what is going to protect you, which is the providence of God. Okay, we go to Esther, Star, and yes, she's named after Ishtar. And Ishtar, we know also as Astarte, Astoret, etc. One of the female main gods of the Mesopotamian pantheon. Also very well integrated, you'd say. These people got a name which was very Persian, and they were named after false gods. And before we say, oh, bad, 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 well, let us remind that we cannot make an appointment with people without generally taking the name of at least two false gods in our mouth. See you Wednesday. January. Oops. Wednesday after German god. January after a Roman god. That happens all the time. And I'm very happy we're not strictly bound to the Old Testament, because it's very clear. You shall not take the name of a false god in your mouth. But here they do, actually. They have been very well integrated in the culture. And it's not going to protect them. Huh? Okay, Haman, an Agagite. And there is some debate about the meaning of the name, but generally it's seen as he's a descendant of Agag, which was an Amalekite king. And it's an old Jewish rabbinic tradition that actually he is from the Amalekites. And we have to look into who were the Amalekites. Well, they attacked in the desert while Israel was traveling from Egypt to the Promised Land, the rear guard, those who were lagging behind. And there is a serious case that they were actually attacking children and women that were lagging behind, the weak ones. They were terrorists. They were not fighting the soldiers up front, not the man, but they were taking the weak ones. And the result is that God says basically, you have touched me, you have touched my children, I will touch you and your children. There will be animosity between you, and you will destroy all the Amalekites because of what they did. So whatever you do, it has results for you and your children. That's the end of Deuteronomy, I think. It's literally said, because they have touched on the Lord, there will be enmity, and you will be destroy them. So if you see what happens next, they brought a curse on them, you could say, and it's very strongly, you will destroy them and you will not take anything of the plunder. And then later, Saul actually has a battle with the Amalekites, and he wins, and he captures the king. And Agag actually asks for Saul. He says, well, come here, you're my friend. And he's not destroying the plunder, the best of it. He takes actually, and when he's confronted by the prophet, Samuel, yes. What did you do? Oh, I kept him. It's a sacrifice for God. No, Samuel says, obedience is better than sacrifice. And disobedience is like witchcraft. This is the reason that God will take the kingship away from you. Serious question. So there is a matter, an unsettled matter between the tribe of Saul and the Amalekites, because Saul has been disobedient. And the results will be, he's taken, the kingdom is taken away, he dies, and all his sons, except on 10 of him, are literally killed and hung from a tree and from a city wall. There is the idea also they had to be killed because their story was they could be changed into animals, so they could actually escape. We could say, well, the demons behind the Amalekites could actually reside in animals, which you also find in the story about the pigs driven into the lake by Jesus. So there's an idea, the badness, the evil of these people. It's a spiritual thing, and you have to get rid of it completely. And Saul does not do it, and actually the curse that's on the Amalekites comes on his and his family. In the later chapter, Esther 9, we will see that actually the judgment against the Jews is reversed and is on the heads of the enemies. And the 10 sons of Haman, like the sons of Saul, are hung from a tree. So there's a reversal of the fate here. Now, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but you need to know a little bit about Agag, his background and historical links, what's being told in this story. So the Feast of Purim, it's not mentioned in the books of Moses, not by the prophets. It's actually very much the thing about Esther, and Esther explains why Purim is celebrated. And possibly it's another feast which is integrated in Jewish culture, which is not from Mosaic law, but has a different origin. It's a feast of reversals, because it has to do with the change from winter to spring. This year it will be on the 6th and 7th of March, right in the series of sermons on Esther. So it's good to learn to understand why Purim is there, because it's celebrated right in a month's time. It leads up to Pesach, it said, 30 days before Pesach. It's in the last month, and Pesach is in the first month. And you can compare this to how Carnival actually leads up to Easter. It's 40 days of fasting, preparing for Easter. So Purim leads up to Pesach, Carnival to Easter. And in that sense, there are some more links, because it's a feast of drinking, dressing up, having fun, children getting involved, storytelling, noise making. And there's a Jewish tradition that says, well, on Purim, you may get so drunk you can't discern between the evil Haman and the righteous Mordecai. So it's a feast of drinking, merrymaking. Maybe it's over the top, we would say, from our Western background, but it's also celebrating and making a laughing stock of the enemies of God. Yeah? Okay, there is a podcast for those who want to know more and understand Dutch. And you just Google Scheppingsdrift podcast Esther. And it's an hour of story, background with a lot of artworks also in this tradition. So that's some more information. Okay, Purim celebrates that the God of Israel will always be faithful to his people, and that Jews would ultimately always be able to survive and taunt their enemies. Okay, And it's a principle at work through all ages, not just something that really happened once, long time ago, no relevance anymore. Now, it's an integration of Persian culture and the message of the faithfulness of God to his people. And if you go to the story of Esther, Ishtar, there's even a story about Ishtar being commanded to go into the underworld, the place where the dead are, and she has to descend, and she's dressed with 7 veils, and she has to take them off, and in the end, she's naked and found guilty. She has to stay in the underworld. But then the gods say, well, it's not a good idea, maybe she gets out, but she needs to find someone to replace her. So she's left out, goes out, everyone is wailing for her, everyone is very sad, except her lover who is sitting on the throne, being mighty, and enjoying himself tremendously. I say, he's not paying respect, he's not really loving her. He can replace her and is dragged into the afterworld. And then they say, well, maybe we'll let him out 6 months and then he has to go back. So we're back to the story of winter going, summer is coming, a game of reversals. But here's also a redemptive element about Esther being found wanting, standing naked there after a dance of 7 veils, which is part of the tradition, and yet being released from death. And there's a reversal story. The idea, what we find in the story of Easter, Jesus going into the underworld, dying, and the underworld couldn't keep him. He was resurrected. Basically, he took our place, and we are free from death. So there's an element of redemption, redemptive element in the story, and it's used to make a point. Even in some religious stories that we think pagan, bad, there's an element that you actually could use to explain the gospel. Okay. And I think still God is at work, and he provides for his people and keeps them safe. Sometimes you have big questions. Why could this happen if God is protecting them? And we have a memorial here in The Hague, and it's the Star of David, also not by Moses, probably also a Babylonian symbol. 7-pointed star, like Ishtar has a 7-pointed star. This is a 6-pointed star. Basically, we find the symbol of the Jewish nation maybe here, the menorah, but here it's a 6-pointed star. And under the star that commemorates what happens to the Jewish people is this plaque, and you can't really read it. Gedenk wat Amalek gedaan heeft, en vergeef haar niet. Also, Amalek, remember them and don't forgive them, because this kind of evil should be removed from the earth. You should not let it be. And sometimes it's seen in other persecutions. In 1953, Stalin in Russia was a powerful tyrant, and he had decided that Israel was not going to side up with him. They were quite socialist. People lived in communal work units, and it was quite socialist, I would say. And he had hoped they would be his friends in the struggle against capitalism, but they were not. So that was the reason why the anti-Semitic elements that were already there in Russia, which have been historically very strong, were unleashed, and there was a strong campaign against Russian Jews. And something remarkable happened on Purim 1953. Joseph Stalin died. He had a hemorrhage, and all his first ministers were around him. No one dared to do anything, because if there was any initiative and he was angry, the end of you. And they just didn't call a doctor, just let him die, basically. You could say, okay, here is God in his providence working, because it was the end of the persecution that was planned, actually. There's quite strong stories about children that were taunted in the class. Lots of Jewish people were in mock trials, sent to gulags or killed. Lots of Jewish people were fired from their positions, but here it stopped. And it's like seen as, okay, God's providence is still at work in history. Because when the story of Esther is a story, and maybe it's historical fiction, it's still his story. It's God's story. And we are part of that story, and it's still at work in us. We should also realize that looking like everybody else and being very well adapted and integrated into culture, if it's evil, will not save us. The God of Israel, who is faithful, he is our salvation. So this is a quote from what I found. So we cannot deny that persecutions of the Jews happened. And in some countries it's crime actually to deny it. And I would say it's a sign of utter stupidity to deny historical fact. But here something happened. God intervened, and this was not going to happen again in Russia. So God is still at work in history, which is his story. Thank you very much. So let us sing. Annie?